Hello, everyone, and welcome to Idle Insights, a show where we talk with interesting people each week about Idle Insights stuff for Idle Champions and Dungeons & Dragons. And with me this week is the amazing Dan Dillon. Welcome. How you doing?
Hi, I'm fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. For those who might not know who you are, how would the fine people at home know about you?
Sure. Well, I am a game designer on Dungeons and Dragons for Wizards of the Coast, so that is pretty much the majority of what I do these days. All D&D all the time.
I mean, it's not a bad thing, right?
No, it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah. So, with you working on Dungeons and Dragons, this is going to be an interesting question I'm going to start with.
All right.
Because our usual opening question, how did you get into Dungeons and Dragons?
Sure. All right. So my initial way back introduction to it, I was a wee little child, probably 8 or 9, and a family friend was clearing out his bookshelf and getting rid of some RPG books, and he just said, "Hey, do you want these?" And it was a stack of the 3 core books from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first edition. A copy of some supplemental books, like there was Unearthed Arcana, Oriental Adventures, and then a Shadowrun first edition book, I think, and
Wow.
just kind of handed those to me and said, "Have fun. See you later." And I just, I started reading them and fell in love with the monsters and all of the mythology nods because I was into Greek mythology at the time.
Ah.
And that just kickstarted that into high gear. And yeah, spent years making characters that were completely wrong. Had no idea. AD&D was very complicated. I was small, drawing terrible dungeon maps on graph paper, and yeah, just went from there.
It's interesting to hear about, you mentioned looking at the monsters. I feel like there's so many people that's how they get into Dungeons and Dragons. They know nothing about the game, but they see the monster manual and they see the cool creatures of the monster manual,
Yeah.
and they're like, what is this? I want to dive into that. Was there like a specific monster that little you were really excited about?
Yeah, gosh, there's a whole bunch. Two big general examples come to mind. One is the Archdevils, because it had all of the actual Archdevils for each layer of the 9 hells in the monster manual in first edition. So it had Asmodeus, it had Despater, it had all those different friendos in there with these black and white line art illustrations and descriptions of them, and that was just mind blowing. That was so cool.
Yeah.
Next to all the dragons and everything, so it's great. The other one that I loved was there were leprechauns in that book, and the illustration of the leprechauns wandered out of their page and their entry and were like messing with the words and illustrations on all the other monsters around. Like, yeah, like they're drawing graffiti on the page. They're messing with the title of the next stat block. Yeah.
I had no idea. It's
Yeah, that was really, really cute.
like the precursor to with 5th edition, and where now we get the sidebars with Volo and Mordenkainen and all that. And
A little bit, yeah.
that's amazing. I'm going to have to go back and look at that. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's super fun.
And so now that you are grown up, you working in D&D, are those still your favorite monsters, or has it evolved into something else?
Oh, no, it's definitely evolved over the years. Let's see. My signature sort of favorite monster in the 3rd edition era were all the various swarms that you could get, particularly hell wasp swarms, because who doesn't love demonic wasps that can crawl into a body and run around water deep in a brand new Edgar suit?
Love is it's a complicated term.
Well, I loved it, and I was
Yeah.
running the game, so everybody else got to experience it.
There you go. You were having fun. And I like you were making characters and said, I probably made them wrong. We all made them wrong.
Oh, yeah.
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 But we all had fun.
These days, gosh, do I have a favorite monster these days? It's really hard to pick any sort of favorite monsters. I do love the Demodans, the fiends from Carceri, the prison plane.
Yeah.
Started with my love of those in the Shackled City Adventure Path in 3rd edition and continuing now, and they're making a comeback in Planescape. I'm so excited.
Yay! Yeah, there's a lot coming back in Planescape. I think a lot of us,
Yeah.
Even those of us who don't remember, weren't part of those earlier editions, just like hearing other people talk about it or watching streams that have, stuff going on in Sigil with the Lady of Pain and everything. I think that's just going to be so much fun. It's interesting. You've got this through line of devils and demons and, the bad places in the plains. What is it about those creatures that draws you in?
So for me, the core of D&D is heroes struggling against evil. So when you have these threats, these existential evils, these, sort of manifestations of all of our real world demons and monsters, and that we can then turn into a thing that we can go and slay, that really speaks to me. And having compelling reasons to take up arms and go fight, right? To protect the people who can't protect themselves. That's the heart of D&D to me.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm all about the heroic adventure, especially as I get older, having the opportunity, if only for a couple hours a day on a weekday, to actually make a difference in the world and defeat evil is kind of
Yep.
nice.
Yep.
It's kind of nice.
It's really nice.
With all this experience and love for these hardcore evil creatures, do you have any suggestions for people who are looking to run some of those at home? Because running Asmodeus is not, it's daunting.
Yeah, it really can be. And that's where sort of bringing in your experiences with other media can really, really help. Doesn't have to be specifically D&D stuff that you're drawing from. Like, think about your favorite TV show where the devil has made an appearance. Think about Viggo Mortensen's portrayal of Lucifer in the old movie, The Omen.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
sorry, not The Omen, the Prophecy? The Prophecy, the one with Christopher Walken and yeah.
I am not enough of a
I'm
cinephile
blanking
to
on the
help.
title. I'm
Yeah.
blanking on the title, but it's the one with all kinds of fallen angels, and Christopher Walken plays Gabriel, and Viggo Mortensen shows up toward the end as the devil, and his portrayal of the devil is incredibly creepy and so cool. But yeah, and not even necessarily other media portrayals of the devil. Prophecy. Thank you, chat. You're awesome.
I figured someone in chat was just screaming at the screen.
The Omen was Damien. Sorry. But think about any sort of big bad who, whether they are sympathetic or not, can have a veneer of you can sort of see why they're doing what they're doing, and they're charismatic enough to make you at least stop and be like, wait a minute, are they right? That's really, really compelling to me to bring in as influences for your big devilish villains. And if you want to get into D&D, looking back at some of the portrayals of them, like Jeremy's portrayal of Asmodeus talking to Omen in some of the more recent Acquisitions Inc. games was delightful.
I love that too, because that is an amazing interaction that shows a cleric who is ostensibly a good cleric who is making decisions that make a lot of sense, that are necessarily good. Because I think a lot of people think of clerics as goody two shoes, and I'm here to say there's a whole wide world of clerics.
And there's such a depth of fun and, storytelling trope history and weight to the good person making just an awful decision for the best of reasons that they can manage, or to avoid making a worse decision, right? And then paying the price for it later.
Absolutely. So getting kind of bringing it back to what you've been doing lately as a writer for Dungeons and Dragons, are those kind of interactions kind of where you get your writer jam from? Is it the plots and the storylines? Is it monsters? Is it like when you sit down to create something for D&D, what is the thing you are drawn to that helps give you inspiration?
Sure. Well, I mean, I enjoy writing all kinds of different specific content for D&D, from player-facing stuff like subclasses and spells and feats and magic items to monsters, NPCs, villains, all of that. I love doing it all, and I am lucky in that the assignments vary depending on what I'm working on. So as far as where I get my inspiration, it will depend on what specifically I'm working on. When say I'm designing a monster, I'm very sort of visual and cinematic in how I think about things and how I like to describe combats when I'm running a game. And so when I'm making a monster, I usually have a name and a concept basically to begin with, and I start thinking about what will it look like to fight this thing? What will be the cool moment in a combat that makes the player stop and go, whoa, either, this is terrible, or, oh, I can't wait to use this in my own game, or whatever. What is the awesome thing that this monster is going to do that's going to create great freeze frame or comic book splash page that you want to see. And then I try to make sure that that becomes crystallized into the stat block and into the narrative text in a way that speaks to each other.
And that's always fun as a DM, finding that monster that has that cool thing. It's just like, ooh, I'm going to pull this out. And whether it's to terrorize your players or just like, I'm going to pull this thing out and I know that the barbarian is going to love tanking this thing. You know, that kind of interaction is always fun.
Yes.
So you recently got a chance to work on a book, speaking of all of your writing credits, that just came out a couple days ago. Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants. Can you talk a little bit about what did you do on this new book that came out?
Sure. So my main work in Bigby's was the enclaves, the giant enclaves in Chapter 4, and just not all, but a huge swath of the encounter tables in Chapter 3. So the enclaves are individual places of power, special places that are either created by giants or steeped in giant magic, remnants of some ancient empire, that sort of thing. And we presented them in a way that they all have, you know, they're all just varied sort of places. They can be put kind of anywhere in a world or anywhere outside of a world in a few of these instances. And while they may have a history of what sort of giant built them, there's nothing decided about who or what is living there now and why. And they all come with a range of story hooks to sort of give the DM the idea of why is this place special? Why do the players want to be there? Who sent them there? Does this send them to another one of these special places and link them together? You know, what challenges are they going to face despite who's living there now? And then it refers you to the previous chapter with all of those cool encounter tables for all the different kinds of giants, giant related creatures, you know, so there's just this breadth of DM toolbox that you can grab and fit all these pieces together in so many different ways. I really enjoyed being able to work on helping craft those things. And Patrick Rennie did a fantastic job of taking all of those pieces and doing a show you how to with the free on D&D Beyond Giants of the Starforge adventure. So he took the Starforge location and then used some of the hooks in there and the encounter tables and built an adventure out like that and put a little sidebar in talking about, hey, here's how I did this, here's how you could do it.
And that's great, having that kind of this is how I did it and how you can do it too. Because when I was looking through this book, all these enclaves, there's 18 of them, I think.
Yes, I think that's correct.
More than a baker's dozen.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a ton. And just the idea right away of, because you've had these little narrative hooks and these little things that tie into each other, just doing an entire campaign of like giant hopping, just like we're going to go here, there, and everywhere. I just love, is there one enclave, if someone was to put that kind of campaign together, that you would suggest starting with?
Putting together a string all of the enclaves together throughout a campaign.
Yeah.
Let's see. One of the best ones to do that could be, I wouldn't want to start with this one because it's kind of high level. You know what? They're modular enough that you could make this work. So there's one called, oh gosh, what's it called? It's a storm giant monastery, like a destroyed storm giant retreat on the bottom of the ocean, on the edge of this chasm, like the Mariana Trench that just goes down into darkness. And the trench flows into this sort of planar portal junction. One way goes to the Shadowfell, the other way goes to the plane of water. So there's just all kinds of different stories that can come from that. And the sort of story behind it is death giants from the Shadowfell slipped up through the trench and destroyed the retreat and the storm giants that used to live there. But there's inside this retreat, there's this lightning archive, this sort of network of these coral and crystal computers that are infused with lightning, and it contains all of the knowledge that the giants had there. So that could be a really cool hub location that can point you to all of these different places if you can figure out, get down to it, survive the crushing depth and maybe shadow horribleness of of the place now, and then figure out how to use the lightning archive without getting electrocuted and tap into this lost knowledge.
Because lightning and water, they go together great. Never any
Yes.
problems with lightning and water. I love that you mentioned this one because I also was super drawn to the Lightning Archive. I think it's the Forsaken Deep, I think is
Forsaken
the
Deep. That's what
yeah.
it's. Yep.
And the fact that you basically give, here is a library. What's in the library? What would you like to have in the library?
Whatever you need in the library. And here's a way you can make it work in general terms if you don't have anything figured out for it yet.
So in specific terms, I'm going to get into the weeds just a tiny bit.
Sure.
I love that in the book it gives the option, the idea of like using the commune spell as a
Mm-hmm.
way of the delivery method for this information.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that spell is what you get in return is usually like a yes or no, like a very
Mm-hmm.
simple answer. Was there a reason that you wanted to use that spell or that kind of delivery method in specific, or at least offer that to DMs?
Yeah. So the easiest way to sort of look at that is like you could imagine that as sort of like the card catalog of the of the archive, where this sort of gives you the hey, what's here,
It's the
and
Dewey
it's a
Decimal System of
yeah, yeah,
giants.
yeah, 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 yeah. And it's a really easy place for DMs to grab a hold of in a pinch. Because that gives them the ability to start laying some breadcrumbs, maybe directing the players away from avenues that they don't want to mess with, or that might be red herrings or lead them astray inadvertently, that sort of thing. And it also gives them the wiggle room to be like, all right, I'm going to need another session to prep all of this specific information. So here's a pointer, and then I can figure everything out and deal with it later. Also, it's very usable for the players. There are some spells in a similar vein that are unreliable or that have some sort of detriment to them, like the Contact Other Plane spell can sort of whammy your mind a bit if you're not careful and lucky and good at your saving throws. And that's not really the vibe I wanted there. If the DM wants to do horrible otherworldly corruption stuff, they're free to do that using like one of the shadowy or creepy death giant-y encounter tables to fill the place with stuff, or undead, like ghosts of storm giants who are restless, that sort of thing. I didn't want the archive itself to be doing that unless the DM decides to tweak it. And Commune is an easy place to start. And if the DM decides there's specific information in this archive you can get a hold of, or hey, once you know what to ask for, you could use a more detailed spell like Divination that will give you, or Legend Lore will give you a better chunk of information, then they're free to do that. This was just like, here's quick, easy, effective, useful starting point.
And trustworthy, like you said. I think that's a really important thing for both the players and the DM. So that's
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's cool because a lot of the other ones either are unreliable narrators or people who are you're talking to them and they want something in return, or yeah, there's some chance of a horrible thing. And when
Yeah.
you're already under the ocean dealing with lightning, you've got enough to worry about.
Exactly. Yep.
So some of these hooks that you've been talking about that not only get you to places, but also like, oh, we're in this place and now we can go to this other enclave. When you're coming up with these enclaves, do you come up with like, oh, this is a cool place for these kind of giants first? Or do you have a hook in mind that then you can build something around?
So the way I worked on this is James, the lead on the book, said, hey, we want to do this thing. Here's the basic idea of these places. I would like you to come up with stuff to fill this chapter with. Cool things, go. And so I came up with a big list of short pitches. So like a name, and some of them are the names that made it into the final book. Some of them had placeholder names. And then just like a short sentence or two to describe what the place is, why it's cool, what sort of effect or hook it might have, just in the general tenor of the place. And I tried to think about what would be an interesting thing for at least each of the at least that the giant types of the various types of giants from the ordning would have built resonates with their place in giant society and the sort of greater metaphysical breakdown of how these giants exist. I wanted one of each place to be very grounded in what each of these giants do and how they are. And then spreading out from there, the idea of, ancient giant empires, what would they leave behind? What sort of legacy could that be? And that's where you get things like the forest crystal, this crystal full of illusion magic in the woods that used to have this greater significance. And then there are some other places that are like, oh, the Singing Sands. This used to be a big magical crystal, but it's been pulverized, and now it's this crystalline sand that blows around the desert, and weird stuff happens. Those I didn't say it specifically, I don't think, but it's implied that they were part of the same sort of global network.
Is there any of the giant types that you found more difficult to come up with a enclave for, and were there some that as soon as you thought of them you went, oh, I know exactly what to do?
Yeah, some of them were very easy. Fire giants, the easy go-to was like, all right, some kind of forge, right? Because that's their whole deal is craftsmanship, working metal, creating great wonders. But you know, not just wanting to be like it's a forge, and wanting to do something different and interesting and worthy of being this special place that gets specific mention in a book. Like anybody can say there is a giant forge, there is an anvil, right?
Yeah.
So the Star Forge is powered by a literal fallen star. It's powered by radiant energy instead of specifically fire. So fire giants found this thing that's a little bit outside of their normal wheelhouse, but found a way to harness it to do what they do using this strange power source.
And were there any that you took a look at and went, oh, what would
Had to
these
chew
giants
on for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Cloud giants, because I think the easy is flying castle, but that's old hat for cloud giants, right? That's their basic thing, so you can't just do that. So I had to think for a while about what is a cloud giant's sort of story in the D&D multiverse, and how could that translate to a place that resonates with them, but is also not the same old thing that they usually do. And that became the Misty Vale, this sort of fog shrouded valley that moves around from place to place across the plains in the different worlds, sort of like a Brigadoon-esque kind of thing.
I think that's one of the reasons I love the Singing Sands that you mentioned earlier.
Mm.
I mean, part of it, I'm a musician, so anytime there's going to be a musical hook in there, I'm like, ooh, okay. But the fact that I could see that being applicable to a bunch of the different giant groups,
Yeah.
just because of all of the different things that it touches upon, and that's the place I want to go. That's the place I want to send my players. That's the place that I want to go. I want to turn that entire place into stained glass. I want to make it all. I want to bring the forge over and just like, and now it's pretty and everything.
Yeah.
So were there any of those type of enclaves that you just had this really cool idea and then said, okay, how can I work the story to make it work with a giant?
Yeah. Let's see. One of those, Hayatea's Hall, I think it's called. So it's a great mountain. It's a great hall carved into a mountainside, which is kind of standard, except it has this idea that it's infused with this magic that whoever holds the hall, their group, their tribe, their family, their clan, whatever, they become very, very prosperous, right? Everything goes right for them. They reach great heights. They attain great power, but it's always short-lived for some reason. Like they rise fast and fall spectacularly. And so built in these magical effects that would be just really great boons to a ruler and their people to make sure that they prosper and that they get ahead and have all these advantages over their enemies, but then also reasons why it sort of becomes their downfall as well. So that was sort of the idea that started there, and that came a little bit from Beowulf, specifically the animated movie version of Beowulf, where people make the deals with the entity off in the mountain, and they become king and rule, and then their comeuppance rolls around, and then they fall and somebody else takes their place, and the cycle starts over again. So that was not specifically a giant related thing to begin with. And I had to sort of rethink and just sort of spin the story in a way that, how does this connect to giants specifically? And so then I came up with tying it to the giant goddess Hyatea and sort of her portfolio, her deal. And that then was twisted by the intervention of another giant deity who cursed it.
And once again, bringing in that idea of like people making deals with things and doing what they think is the best for them at that moment or for their people. I
Yep.
like your through lines. They are fun.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the choose your children question.
Sure.
Which one of these enclaves is your favorite and why?
That is a difficult question.
I know.
But I think my favorite is the runic circle. And this one was actually picked on one of the D&D Beyond streams earlier this week that they talked about with James Wyatt. So I was very pleased. Yeah, the runic circle is this combination circle of magic runes, because giants are all about this, this magic with their runes that they have. We've messed with this in earlier editions of D&D. It was very prominent in Storm King's Thunder. It comes back in Bigby's, that these magic runes are symbols that embody a concept and all of that stuff. So this series of intricate symbols is, circles, runes, and then also astronomical charts. So star charts, constellations, paths between them. And it's a combination navigation point, communication point, and giant spellbook. So if you study this huge runic circle, you can decipher spells coded into it. You can trace the star patterns with whatever you can see in the sky on any given night, and you can communicate with far-flung travelers. And this is a place that and this ancient giant empire used to keep in communication with their people who went exploring the multiverse through flying ships, through wild space, through the astral plane. And so this is kind of a nod to Spelljammer, a bridge to, hey, if there are other worlds of the material plane you want to mess with, this is a place where you can sort of connect with that, because when you get in communication with these far travelers, they also have an instinctive sense of the direction back to the runic circle. So it is literally a beacon to help bring them home when it's time for them to come back.
This also sounds like a wonderful place to start a campaign that hops through the enclaves. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, because the DM can code whatever information they want into the circle itself.
And that it comes with those innate, baked in ways of communicating or learning about all these other places. That's very cool. When you are coming up with these places, that they all have to be giant places, and you're talking a bit about learning from the giants' runes and their spell books and everything, how much of the fact that there's a big size difference, I guess is the best way to put it, between what the normal adventures are going to be and these giants, do you have to think about when you're creating these places?
So that is something I thought about just sort of in the conceptual stage. So you take something like the Ashen Grotto, which is a giant burial ground. It's really not much different than any medium-sized folk who would have this, catacomb or cave system where they lay their dead to rest, that sort of thing. It's just on a much bigger scale, and that's more handled on the map side of things, which Dyson Logos was fantastic about. So we just, gave him a description of, here's this place, here's cool stuff about it, give us wondrous depictions, and he did, because he's awesome. The thing in the book that addresses that is actually earlier in the in one of the earlier chapters too, I think. There's actually a decent section where it talks about adventuring in the lands of the giants and sort of what it means to be in a place that's built by people who are 20 feet tall. The concerns of how big are steps for giants? How big is a table? How big is their everyday things that you take for granted? Like, how big is a giant's fork? There's guidelines for all of that. And then, even some mechanical guidance for climbing around on or under giant furniture, steps, doors. How big is a storm giant's door? That sort of thing. So using the different pieces of the book, a lot of that is addressed. I didn't specifically address that in the enclaves because the other parts of the book and the other writers had done such a great job of it. I didn't have to.
That totally makes sense. When you're thinking about, and this is just in general, when you're thinking about creating a place that is going to be that huge, was there anything that you thought about that was just a normal thing that you're going to put in a library, in an archive, in this hall, in wherever, and then afterwards went, I have no idea how people are going to deal with that if it's huge? Like someone was mentioning a fork that you could use. It was a giant's fork, but then you could just use as a javelin because it's so big. Was there like a specific thing that afterwards you went, oh wow, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so that I think would have been sort of more in the tables of what sort of stuff is in a giant's bag, what sort of stuff do you find in a giant's treasure hoard, those areas. So those things are all relevant to the enclaves, but I didn't super think about those in my writing of those sections. Again, because the other authors working on the various other portions of the book had just nailed that information so spectacularly. So for me, it's probably more along the lines of I did think about that with connecting some of the enclaves together. In the case of like Anum's Cradle, which is this hollow world, journey to the center of the earth, interior cave jungle system with its own weird sun and gigantic dinosaurs and other huge animals, and a massive petrified stone titan that's reaching up through the surface, and then the fingers of that thing becomes one of the other enclaves. So I thought about it more in connective tissue terms, and then like if you're in a jungle that's giant sized, what does that mean for adventures taking place there? I didn't think about it sort of in the granular, how are you going to deal with you have to steal the key to a giant's vault. Well, the key is, the size of a couch or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to steal a key to get some fun loot for all of the people who are at home. I'm going to take a second away from this awesome conversation to talk about our in-chat giveaway. We have the awesome Sean in chat right now who's going to be running a giveaway. If you enter the code that he's going to be putting in chat shortly, you will have the opportunity to win 42 chests of your choice in the game, excluding Bahamut chests. So any other chests that you want. So keep an eye on the chat. I think that keyword is going to be going in just a second. Watch as I just keep an eye on things. Also, I forgot to say at the beginning, this is a live interview, so I don't know how much time we're going to have at the end for questions, but if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat with question in big capital letters. That way Sean can grab it and stick it into our little backstage document, and we'll see how much we can get through in the time we have left. Meanwhile, getting back to the giants, because I've been digging into this book, and just like you said at the beginning about how these enclaves are really good places to like pull out and just plunk in places and be like, well, now this is where you're going. I've already got a couple that I'm going to do exactly that. Oh, also awesome. The keyword is giants, which is very apropos. Sorry, I just got distracted by the chat. There's a lot of people in chat.
A lot of people saying giants.
So now that the book is out, beyond playtesting, beyond everything else that was going on, now that it's out, do you have any plans on running any of this in one of your games? And besides the ones that are your favorite enclaves, is there one that you are excited to start running for an actual table?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to use one of them in a game table that I'm running at GameholeCon this fall. So that'll be exciting. So that one I'm going to use probably Horizon's Edge, which is a giant demi-plane in the deep ethereal with sort of a lost remnant of this lost empire. So if you find the right puzzle cube and figure it out, you can open a gateway to this bubble in the deep ethereal that has all these giant ruins, very well preserved because, there was nothing there necessarily to tear it all down. So you might find untold riches of knowledge and magic and maybe even in strangely advanced technology from this bygone time. So that'll be a great time. I'm also looking forward to using the Endless Rock Slide, which is sort of a river of stone and earth and grit that pours down a mountain from one portal from the elemental plane of earth down to a portal to the elemental plane of earth, and it's just a constant cycle. But since it's from the elemental plane of earth, any mineral material you can think of can theoretically be in that slide. And so there's, a facility built there to, sort of sieve the contents and pull out the good stuff, and runes on the bridges around it to gather the innate earth energies that are flowing through this planar river and repurpose that for whatever you could think of for elemental earth energy to do. So I think that'll be a fun one to integrate into a campaign.
And hopefully find some amazing earplugs, because that's
very loud.
That's amazing but loud. Silence spells all over the place at all times.
Not a waterfall you want to fall into either.
No. You end up basically in a place that is uncomfortable, and then you're back in the river, and it's just a fun endless cycle. That's for all of those characters who accidentally fall into rivers and get swept away. This is one that you just gotta be careful of.
Takes it to another level.
Absolutely. While the person being picked for our giveaway is picked, congratulations to whoever who won, I'm going to change topics just a little bit.
Sure.
There was this little game that came out recently, Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, is that out?
Yeah, this little tiny game. I saw.
We won't talk about how many hours I've put into it already.
No,
Please continue.
Listen, we are all there with you, and most of us, we look at it and go, "Oh, half of that was in character creation." So
it is robust.
There's a lot. Well, let me ask, what has been the first character you've created in Baldur's Gate 3?
Okay, so my first Baldur's Gate 3 character, not including the early access stuff, which I messed around with quite a bit when it came out, but my first release day character is a half-orc. Well, started out as half-orc fighter 1, but this was a concept that I wanted to play in tabletop and just really haven't ever gotten the chance to, so I decided I'm finally going to do it. So starts with one level of fighter and then goes warlock, pact of the blade for all the rest levels. Ooh. So he's a big two-handed packed blade wielding, heavy armor wearing badass orc warlock. It's super fun. Eldritch Blast in this game. Apologies to anyone who's heard me talk about this stuff before, because I will keep raving about Eldritch Blast. It is one of the most fun spells to cast in any video game I've ever played. The sound design on it is fantastic. The animation is fun, and repelling blasting people off of edges into cliffs will never get old.
Off of things, off of cliffs, in front of things, in front of...
Pushing them back into damage zones, like the Wall of Fire my other party member has cast, yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you'd created this character because it's a concept that you've had. On the other side of that, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in playing this game who have never played D&D before, or maybe they've started to play this game and now are interested in playing D&D. And as complex and amazing as that character creator is, it does show off the giant amount of options people have.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who, if this is their first TTRPG, whether Baldur's Gate 3 or sitting down at the table, do you have any suggestions for where they should look to maybe find an origin, a class that they're going to find fun and not daunting?
Sure. So are we thinking in terms of, do you want to go do research on this, or what's the advice for just looking at the Baldur's Gate character creator or just looking at the player's handbook to build your character in the respective iteration of the game we're talking about?
It's a good clarification. I say let's go for Baldur's Gate 3 since that's what we're talking about. And I think there's a lot of people, we're going to have a lot of fans who are just learning about Baldur's Gate 3 because of Lae'zel going into the game.
Yeah, that's awesome, by the way.
Yeah, she is super fun. So I think there's a decent number of people who are going to show up to Baldur's Gate 3 who are only familiar with Lae'zel, and now they're confronted with character creation as an expert in Dungeons and Dragons. Do you have any advice?
Yeah. So somebody who is not familiar with D&D, like this is their first sort of experience with it.
Yeah.
All right. So then I guess I start there with think about what sounds fun to play. Don't super worry about how the mechanics are going to play out, any of that. Hopefully that'll work out for you. There's almost no way to figure that out until you get in the weeds a bit. So think about what sings most to you as like when you think, I'm going to play, insert character here. What jumps out? Do you want to play a big beefy, heavy armor, giant weapon swinging badass, do you want to pick up bad guys and throw them into other bad guys? Do you want to rain down lightning on your foes? Do you want to turn into bears and lions and do you want to be a sneaky, stealthy rogue, talking your way through things? All that kind of stuff. Think about the image of the character that you want to play, and then try to match that to the class that you see in the list there.
And then, of course, make friends with Lizelle,
Yeah.
get her into your party, and she'll disapprove of everything you're doing, but that's okay, because that's just what she does.
She can be a little grating to begin with, but she's good people.
She's excellent to have around, but every once in a while I make a decision. I'm like, all right, I know Lizelle is going to disapprove of this, and that is fine. We're getting towards the end here.
Sure.
Which is surprising, but not, because this has been a fun conversation. So I'm going to do a little bit of skipping around and actually grab a couple questions from chat, since thank
Great.
you for passing those along. And since we talked about this just a little bit before the show, I'm going to ask this one from Gliding Secret. What's on your bookshelf? All fun stuff? Anything you're excited to show off?
So tons of game stuff is on my bookshelf. It's not all D&D. It is an awful lot of D&D 5th edition here, and some over here. Down below on the lower shelves you can't see, I have some previous edition stuff. Got just some of my older reference books there. I've got a campaign binder with the Age of Worms adventure path that I ran. That was the final 3.5 campaign I ran before I switched over to 5th edition. I've also got a bunch of World Chronicles of Darkness stuff. So I have, all this lovely blue up here. That's Mage the Awakening. I've got my Vampire the Requiem over here. Yeah, and then I have a sort of a smattering of various others in indie games over here. So those are fun.
And a skull.
And a demi-lich looking and staring at the back of my head, which is fine, I'm sure.
It's absolutely fine. Listen,
Yeah.
You are not the first person that I've been on a stream with who's just had a skull sitting on the shelves behind them. I think it's a theme with D&D players.
A little bit.
Just like, let me just go grab this skull. Also, and this has nothing to do with D&D, but this has everything to do with awesome stuff on the internet. Anyone who follows you on your socials knows that you have adorable Sphinx cats.
Yeah.
Tell me, why are Sphinx cats the most adorable cats?
I just look at them; they're little gremlins. My love of sphinxes is weird. So this started way back in, must have been just after high school, like summer after I graduated. I came home late one night, like late, like small hours of the morning. Everybody else is asleep. House is dark. I'm stumbling upstairs. I turn on the light in the bathroom and have a heart attack and nearly collapse to the floor. When I come to, I realize that it's because there are a bunch of imps on the counter staring at me like they're about to make me an offer for my soul. And once my vision cleared, I realized it was the splash page from a pet magazine of Sphinx kittens that my sister that day had removed from the magazine and put up on the mirror. And I was so fascinated by these little giant-eared, naked, wrinkly-skinned, gremlin-y beasts that they just have never left my mind ever since then. And so a few years ago, my sister sort of marshaled the family forces, and a whole bunch of people chipped in to adopt a Sphinx cat for me for my birthday, and that is Archibald. And so yeah, that's where that came from. I don't know, I love them. They're so affectionate, they're so snuggly, they're very warmer than you might expect. I think their normal body temp is like 102, so they're like little hot water bottles.
Oh wow.
They love to snuggle. He'll crawl up on my chest and just rub his face in my beard. He's adorable.
And have you put him into any D&D games? Has he been a familiar that's shown up? Have you made a tabaxi?
Not him specifically, but I have made a Sphinx tabaxi. Yep, I played that in a one-shot run by Super Dillon. So I played a sort of snooty, aristocratic, rich millionaire sort of Sphinx tabaxi in Neverland.
That's awesome. I love it when people put their pets into the game. It's super fun. And it's always kind of adorable, even if they're going to play their pets like a snooty tabaxi, who's maybe, a little too snooty. I've got one other question here that kind of, it's not directly related, so I have no transition. Sorry, that's just me.
Yeah, it's fine. Just jump on it.
So you've talked before about how you get anxious before running D&D games.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how long you've been playing, doesn't matter how long you've been DMing, doesn't matter if the people you're playing with are some of the most cool, awesome people that you've known for forever. And I really appreciate that, because I think there's a lot of people who they think that something's wrong when they have that kind of anxiety, when they have that kind of nerves. Do you have any techniques that you use when those nerves hit to help you get to the point where you're having fun?
Yeah. This is a thing for me, and yeah, I've talked about it before. I've been running D&D specifically for well over 30 years, and this is still every time I'm going to run a session, I have nerves. I have twisty stomach, don't want to do it. Why did I agree to this? This is the worst idea I've ever had. And the way I get through it is usually just to review whatever I'm going to be running for that day. If it's a bullet list of things I want to do in the session, if it's a few stat blocks for an encounter that I know is going to happen, I just sort of look over it, make sure it's fresh in my mind, remind myself that I'm doing this because these players keep showing up every week. So that means I'm doing something right and they're having fun, because if people are not having fun, they will stop coming. So just don't listen to the weasels in your brain whispering lies, because they whisper lies all the time. Sometimes they scream them. And then for me, I just take that anxious energy and I am able to turn it into energy to run the game. Once I sit down, once we get started, once the dice hit the table and I start narrating and asking people what they're going to do now, all of that sort of goes away and it becomes fuel.
That's awesome. And yeah,
So
it's the kind of thing in where it's your gremlin brain. It's the weasels
yeah,
who are telling you
yeah,
the bad things.
yeah,
But I love that fact of, if these people weren't having fun, they wouldn't show up. I
yeah,
mean, everyone knows how hard it is to schedule a D&D game. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so people are prioritizing hanging out with you, listening to what you have to say, rolling dice with you. Don't listen to the buzzing static in your head. Listen to your friends who want to play with you.
And I can confirm it happens to me as well. Even though I have grown up a professional and I have professional performance training, I get nervous every single time. I got nervous before this show. We all just get nervous. And I think for people we're going to use Baldur's Gate 3, we're going to use the new Giant book that just came out, who are going to use any of these new tools and get excited about D&D and go, you know what, I want to play, I want to run. And then the pit in their stomach shows up. It's absolutely normal. It is totally normal. We all get it. You know what we all get is the social medias and how awful they can be.
Yes.
But
we exist on them.
But you know what? Sometimes you get to see Sphinx cats, and then it makes social media all that much better. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about you on the internet?
Sure. I'm at Dan_Dillon_1 on Twitter, and I'm also on Blue Sky now, which my handle for that is...
It's coming
up.
1
second.
It's okay.
One moment.
Listen, we're all new at this kind of thing, and
I think it's just dandillon.bsky.social. Look at that.
There you go. And apparently, if you're going to, was it Gamehole Con? You said you were running a game?
Yeah. I'm going to be at Gamehole Con. Going to run a couple of tables of D&D there, and I'm going to be at PAX Unplugged later this year too. Can't wait.
Excellent. For anyone who is going to one of those cons and wants to sign up for one of your tables, do you know yet how that's happening, or is that information will come soon?
The Gamehole Con event registration is open. Just go to the website. I'm not sure if there are any spaces open on either of the tables that I'm running, but by all means, go check them out and jump in if you're going. And if you're not in one of my games and you're at the con, just say hi. I'd love to say hello and talk about fun things.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me and chatting about awesome D&D things and
My
your
pleasure.
Cats. It's been awesome to have you. Thank you to both Gabe and Sean, who have been our moderators, who jumped in and taken care of chat. Also, thank you to V, who I saw in chat. Always wonderful to see you there. And we'll see you next encounter. Bye.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.